So welcome back, campers. We are going to go through another video here of FreeCodeCamp's quiz webpage. And this is one of their modules where we are trying to build out some sort of form, but also take into consideration some accessibility features in there as well. So if you are new to the channel, my name is Rob. I'm a coding instructor for FreeCodeCamp, and that is where we are taking a unique approach on FreeCodeCamp's modules, where we're not just showing you what the answer is, we are explaining what each item is and why are we adding this and what does it do, and we're looking up things in documentation. So that way you are more familiar with the code base. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it, but there's one thing that you all can do for us. Make sure that you hit that like button on this video. It really helps out that YouTube algorithm. It's something free, takes only a second. All right, let's go right into the step number 21. All right, so what we're looking at here is step number 21 with FreeCodeCamp's Build a Quiz webpage. And it says, keeping in mind the best practices for these inputs, we want to make sure that they are assigned the appropriate type as well as the name attribute. And so what we're going to do here for the input field, and if we're taking a look at what FreeCodeCamp has given us from all the way back from step 1 is this little pop-up here. It's asking us to, hey, name the types of each one of these input fields, okay? And if we notice here, the date of birth, it gives us a date. And so that's a real quick indicator that, hey, FreeCodeCamp's also utilizing the types on here as well. And so one of the very first ones that we're going to use for this input here is it's going to be type of text, okay? The next one we're going to use, HTML has one for email as well. Again, it doesn't matter where they go on the input field. They can go before the ID, after the ID. They're just attributes. So we're going to go ahead and change this one to the type of email. And one of the benefits about making sure that this is the type of email, when we click a submit button, it's going to check these input fields to see if they are properly formatted. Now, it's not going to check whether or not the email is a valid email. It's just going to check whether or not it is formatted in the correct way of an email. Does it have an @ sign? Does it have a dot and then XYZ at the end, right? Those types of things is what it is looking for when we are putting in these validations. The next thing here for the input for this one, it's going to be type of date. So let me show you a few other of the input field types. Again, it's always nice to know, go a little bit above and beyond what it is asking here. And then we're going to come back in here and do the name attribute as well. I'm over here with W3 Schools. I just did a Google search for HTML input fields and it gave me this link here. And I'm not telling you to memorize each one of these. That's not the point of this. The point is, hey, there's documentation. You can look things up. You can see that there's way more things as far as the input type than just a text or an email or a date, right? So all of these things are valid ones. And notice here by default, it is type of text. Let's go ahead and see if it talks about the naming as well. So down here on W3 Schools, it does mention about what the name is. It just says that it's text. It specifies the name of the input element. Now later on, when we are dealing with forms and JavaScript, it becomes very important what you name it, because I'm going to show this to you just as a little preview of where eventually you're going, because we've seen these input fields before. We're going to give it a name here in this example here, text1. And right now the value is if somebody typed in there foo. Once we get down to the JavaScript part, notice that the text1 is foo. And so that's where the name comes from is, hey, it's pulling that name from that element and it's assigning the value of foo to it as if somebody typed it in. I know that's a little bit of minutia right now, but that's again where we're with this. And why do we want to give input fields names? It's so that we can deal with the key and the value a little later on when it comes to JavaScript and the form submission. All right, let's go back to the code and add in what we're supposed to for these names. All right, so we're back in the code editor here of FreeCodeCamp, and it's time to add the name attribute to the input fields. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and do name, and then this is gonna be student name. And then we're just gonna follow suit with whatever the ID is. And I do hate this from a new student learning point of view, because like sometimes the IDs here are not gonna match the names. Just keep that in mind whenever we're doing this here. They don't have to match. Now, as far as placeholders go, I didn't really see this on the other one, meaning the one that we saw in step 1 with the placeholder. So let me show you that real quick. Right here on the name, you don't see any kind of placeholder text on there, but apparently the unit test wants to have it there. So let's go ahead and add it. So here we are on the very first input one. We are going to do the placeholder, and then we're going to set that equal to enter name. And you can see that the placeholder value is in here. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. We did a lot of improvements on here. Hopefully we got them all. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step here. Okay, so step number 22 can definitely lead you down an accessibility rabbit hole here. It says, even though we added the placeholder of our first input element in the previous step here, it's actually not the best practice for accessibility. Too often users are confused with placeholders. And so it wants us to remove it. And doing a little bit of research, and I can provide some links as well, because it does talk about how placeholders, they should be used very sparingly. It doesn't provide a great contrast for the text. Obviously, you can change those values with CSS. Oftentimes it gets confusing, meaning that maybe you are trying to edit your profile and is it a placeholder text or is it text coming from the database that is already in here? So it can be confusing in that manner as well. So it says it's best to avoid to use the placeholder text when possible. So let's go ahead and see if there's anything else that we want to do on here. I don't think so. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step here. So we're on step number 23 with building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that within the second section, which is right here, it would like us to add 2 div elements with the class of question block. And then in each one of those, make sure that we have an H3 and then increment the number starting with 1, and then also have 1 field set element with the class of question. So a lot to digest in this. And one of the things that I always like to maybe even have up when I'm going through this is taking a look at the original example, and it might help me understand the words that they are telling us to do here and applying it. So let's take a look at it. So this is what we're building, and it wants us to create a div block with the questions in it. And so if I were to take this little tool here, this right here is what we're working on, as well as this. Now, the only thing that it wants us to put in there is the H3 with a 1, and then another H3 with a 2 on it. And then each one of these has its own like little field set. So we don't know what goes inside of it quite yet, but we know that this block right here that you see on this rectangle, that is going to be a field set, and then this one is as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the code and make this part happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get one of them correct first, and then I'm just going to copy and paste. So it says that we need a div. And again, I'm focusing on the opening and closing aspects of these in order to get this to work properly. I am going to give myself a little bit of space, but on the very first div, I needed to have this class on here, which is question block. So I'm going to do class, set that equal to question block. All right, and then inside this div, it says that we need to have an H3. Now, again, if we were looking at that example that we had, it said that it wanted the word question 1 on it. Now, these instructions here just said to put the number 1 on there. Again, I don't know if the test is looking for text in there or the number 1 needs to be in there, but I'm just going to put question number 1, and hopefully that will be good enough for the test. I don't know if the hashtag was in there. I'd have to look. But anyways, question number 1. The next thing that it wants on here, it says is a field set element. So that will look like this. Field set, again, open and close. And then inside here, it just wants a class name of question. All right, I think that's all that it wants, but we need to repeat this and put the 2 in there. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'll go ahead and paste it here, make it look semi-decent. And this needs to be question 2. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out here and see if it is going to work for us. So it says, sorry, did not pass. The element needs to have a 1 in it. Let's go ahead and remove the hashtag and see if that fixes it. So that's the error that I was getting. The H3 element should have a text of 1. Oh, I don't want to reset it. I want to go ahead and check the code. Maybe it does just want 1 in there. And let me get rid of that. Check the code. That's what it was wanting. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next step here. Step number 24 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It says here that the question numbers are not descriptive enough. Let's go ahead and put in a new nested span. And this is going to be for the visually impaired. It says without having to add any kind of visible text to the element, it's also going to add text only that the screen reader can read. So what it's wanting us to do is at the end of the one, it wants us to do a span tag. And inside here, it wants us to add a class of SR only. I'm guessing it's naming that for screen reader only. And this will not be visible to the person seeing it now. I believe in CSS, we may be hiding this somehow from the user, but still allowing screen readers to be able to read it okay. Let's go ahead and do this one on the H3 for 2 as well. Let's check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. So I had to do a double take on this one. So step number 25, it says we have to add in the text of question to the beginning portion of the span. Now, in the previous one, it had us put the span after the number, and when we hit the next button, it magically appeared on the left. Personally, I don't know why they're switching it, but maybe we'll find out in the next few steps on what's going on with this. But it wants us to put that keyword question in there, and the same thing for here. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. So step number 26 in building a quiz web page, it tells us that the SR only text is still visible, meaning that we still see the question part of this because that's what's wrapped in the span tag for us visually, right? And it wants us to only make this for the screen readers. So this is a pattern. And again, you might want to put this in your notebook as well, as far as how do we make things hidden from the user, but still being able to have screen readers access it. So it says on here that the position needs to be absolute, the width needs to be 1 pixel height. So we're basically just like crunching this up into the tiniest little pixel. We want to take it out of the flow of any kind of HTML web page structure. And then we're clipping it. You can see here with the 4 zeros, a no wrap, putting a border of 0 on there, and basically just crunching it down to nothing. But the screen readers will pick up on this, even though it's going to be hidden to us. And I did put these little comments in here because I wanted to demonstrate to you that visibility hidden, right? Notice that the block is gone, but the space that it took up is still there. The same thing with display none, not the same thing with display none, but display none will actually remove it visibly from you. And it also takes up no space also. Now you may ask yourself, why aren't we just able to use this? That would solve the problem. And you'd be incorrect because we learned from the previous lessons that freeCodeCamp gave us, which is that even though you're utilizing these two different types of trying to hide things, it also gets hidden from the screen reader as well. Maybe someday they'll come out with some sort of CSS that would work well for us to just do a single line of CSS to say, hey, this is just for screen readers only. That would be nice. However, at this point in time, there's not a way to do that. So really what it's wanting us to do is change all these things. And maybe what would be best is to type all of that stuff out because you can see it all happen in real time. When you're going through, all right, we're going to go position absolute. Where's that going to go? And then the width, and then the height, and then the padding, right? And just to see it disappear from you. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go ahead and do position absolute. You can see that it's now taking out of the flow, and it is in a position now where the 1 doesn't even care about it. The 2 doesn't care about it either. It's being sucked out of that flow of HTML. Next, let's go ahead and give the width and height of this to be 1 pixel. Again, not seeing anything over here. Let's go ahead and change the overflow to hidden. Now it's disappeared. And then for extra good measures here, it wants us to do the padding and the margin. So we're removing the padding, taking the margin to -1 pixel, and then we're going to clip, make sure that there's no wrapping on here, and then the border is 0. So here we go. We can go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we are good to go. Step number 27 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that each field set will contain a true-false question, and each of the field sets nest one legend element with one UL element that has 2 options. So let's kind of break this thing down. I will knock out one of them, and then we'll do the next one. So it's saying here, hey, let's go ahead and have a legend element. Next, let's go ahead and add one UL element with the 2 options. So let's go ahead and do that. So after the legend, let's go ahead and add the UL. Again, practicing that opening and closing so we don't forget. And then in here, it wants 2 different options. Let's go ahead and do an L with a true, and then another one with a false. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it down there. We'll do a false. Okay, I don't know if we need to fill out any part of the legend, but we will see once we test. But we do need to do this or duplicate this and the one down below. So here's our field set, and then I'm just going to go ahead and paste. It looks ugly here, so let me clean that up for the video. All right, I think that's all it needs. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, it passes. Moving on to the next one. Step number 28 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It says, given each field set an adequate name, and then give them both an unordered list class of answered list. Finally, use the legend caption and the context of the field set by placing true, false questions as text content. All right, let's go ahead and get started and deal with the field set, giving it an adequate name attribute. So what it's asking for here, we're just going to go ahead and do a name, and then we're going to do HTML question 1 for their name. Next, we will do that exact same thing on the other field set, but this time we're going to do HTML question 2. All right, that's part 1 here. Let's see what else we have to do. It says, then give both unordered lists a class of answered list. So let's do that. And then we'll do the exact same thing to the other unordered list. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that and come down to the other one. All right, next our instructions tell us, finally use the legend to caption the context of the field set by placing true and false questions as text content. Okay, it removed the true false that I had earlier. So we'll do true, we'll do false, and I'm just going to copy this and bring it down to here. Okay, and let's see if there's anything else to think about on here. I don't know if it wants us to fill in the legends quite yet. Let's go ahead and test this and see if it wants us to fill in the questions. Okay, so it's saying that the UL element needs to have a class of answer list. I don't know, did I mistype it? Let's check here. Answers list. I guess I did mess that one up. Okay, and then let's go ahead and check the code. And then it says you should give the legend some text content. So it does want us to put some stuff in here. I don't know what it wants us to do because it's just going to remove whatever we type in here. So I'm just going to add, this is question 1, and this is question 2, and it's going to come up with what it really wants in there for the next step. All right, let's go and check the code again. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step here. So step number 29, to provide functionality with the true false questions, we need to set the input values that don't allow for both to be selected at the same time. And it says within the list elements, we want to nest the label element. Within each label element, we want to nest in an input field and to include the type. This is what we're going to do. It wants us to wrap the label around the input on here. So we're going to go to the very first one here, and we're going to go inside here, and we're going to do a label. Traditionally, you could also put the input field on the outside, but you would need to have the attribute of 4 on here. Now, I don't know if the unit tests are going to allow us to wrap it without the 4. We're going to try that out because it's redundant if we do have to put that on there when we're wrapping it in the input field. So we're going to go ahead and do an input here. And as far as the input goes, it says that we need to be appropriate with the type that we put on this. And again, we showed you the W3 schools and what are the possible types that go on here. This one, I believe, is going to be the radio button. Let me go ahead and double check that real quick. Yeah, so these are radio buttons that they want us to use here. So that's what we're going to do. So back to the code. Input, the type is going to be for radio. And then the value, we're going to set that to true. And then how do we get the text to show up on here as well? All we have to do is outside of the input field that we have here, we can just put the word true, okay? And you can see that it showed up just fine right here. Again, once we have the false on here, I'll show you a way to just double check to make sure that they're linked properly. But we'll come over here and let's do another one for the false. So here we go. Let me fix this label to make it look a little pretty. So on here, we want this to be false. And then we want the label here to be false as well. So something that we can check on here if they're properly linked is if we click on the text, does the circle fill in? So I click on the false, click on the true, and notice we're running into an issue where they are both selectable. So let's go ahead and troubleshoot that one. So we can fix this by applying the name. So if we come in here and do a name, and this is going to question number 1, and then we come down here and we give it the same name, this should fix the issue because name is the same on both. So let's go ahead and check the false. Let's check the true. And now notice that it is only allowing us to select one of those. Okay. So I believe that should solve our problems here. let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this entire thing and I'm going to paste it down here. Now, of course, you all can type it again if you want, but the one thing that we do need to change on here is the name, okay? Because otherwise there'll be a conflict with what is above. And so let's double check each of these here. So if I click on the false here, it's not highlighting or clicking on anything that you see down here. And these are both independent. So those are both working great. Let's check the code. Again, I don't know if it's going to require us to put the 4 on there. It says, congratulations, we are good to go. So that worked great. All right, moving on to the next step here. So step number 30 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that it wants us to add an ID to all of the radio inputs. So that way we can link our labels to them. Give the first one an ID of Q1, A1, and give the rest of the IDs as Q1, A2, and then so on. Follow them respectively. I'm getting tired, by the way, of them removing my true falses on here. So I'm not going to do them anymore. Just joking. But here's the redundancy of this. We'll do it, but maybe you all can help force the change of freeCodeCamp with this step because it's redundant, it's not needed. And if I even show you of why it's not needed, if we take a look here, the label with the 4 of Q1, A1 is very redundant by having this ID here as well. And so it says that because we are wrapping the label around it, we don't need the for attribute. The only time that we need the for attribute is when the input field is not inside of the label. And for simplicity purposes, this would totally be okay. And I already showed you on the previous one that they are linked, okay? And so it says, since you've already wrapped it here, the for and the ID attributes, unless you have specific reasons, maybe for styling would be one of the only reasons that we would not need this usage here. So maybe there's some styling issues that are going to be present in this, which is why they're doing it. But anyways, let's go ahead and accomplish what they are asking. So in here, it wants us to do the for label or the for attribute, and it wants us to match it to Q1, A1. Then down here, it wants us to have the ID of Q1, A1. All right, that's all 20. And then we're going to come down here for the label. We're going to do 4, and this is going to be Q1, A2, and then we're going to follow suit with the input. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so that way I can go ahead and complete this pattern and then show you the final results. Okay, so this is what I ended up doing here. We have the Q1, A2, and we're matching it with the ID here. So again, it goes 4 and then the ID. Right? So 4 goes for labels, ID goes for inputs. That's how you need to follow this pattern here. Next, I went ahead and did the next 2. So I did the label. This time it's a Q2A1, and then the ID down here is Q2A1. And then the same thing for the next set, Q2A2, Q2A2. Okay, so that's the pattern that it wants us to go with. And now I'm going to go ahead and check the code. Congratulations, we are moving on to the next step here. Wow, we just finished 10 more steps on this, and I don't know about you, but I'm sorry because I kept making you type in true and false, and things were getting wiped out whenever we clicked on the next step. And that's just one of the nuances with this because I don't know how far to go because, again, this is my first time going with it as well. So with that being said, thank you again so much for watching this video. Please leave a comment, and we will see you in the next video. Till then, take care.